So, the esteemed panelists for this session are Qazi Bouland Mussabbir, CEO, co-founder and CEO, Agroshift; Ataur Rahim, co-founder and CPO, ShopUp; Jonathan Abeywickrema, Director, Impact Investment Exchange; Nazat Chowdhury, Partner and MD, Bangladesh, SATP.
All right, thank you, everyone. Please be seated. We'll start the session now. Hi, good afternoon. This is Wahid. I'm an investment manager at IDLC Venture Capital. We have invested in 7 startups, and in Agritech, we have exposure to iFarmer. Before we get into the speaker's questions, maybe I share a preamble on agriculture in Bangladesh. It's a $50 billion market in Bangladesh. It employs 45% of the population in Bangladesh, and it contributes 11% of the GDP. So it's a huge market. There are many opportunities but challenges as well, and we are going to speak about all of that today. We have speakers from Agritech startups, from supply chain startup, from logistic investor, and also impact investor. So we'll get all of the possible angles in agricultural challenges and opportunities. So Bangladesh in the agriculture market is an interesting one. Let me tell you how. We are the largest jute exporter in Bangladesh. Bangladesh is the largest jute exporter, second largest jute producer, inland fish water producer, we are third, rice producer in terms of size, we are fourth. Yet, we somehow end up a net importer for food. So I would like to firstly go to Bouland Bhai. My question would be, how can we work on our productivity in agricultural sector and become a net exporter from a net importer? But before that, I would like you to share a brief intro of yourself.
Thank you, Wahid. Thanks for having me here today. So at Agroshift, we essentially we're building a digital marketplace where we connect consumers directly to the producers. Producers in this case, farmers, traders, processors. You know, unlike a lot of the agri-techs, we just don't exclusively work with farmers because we believe, you know, agri-tech is just beyond that postcard, farmer picture stuff. There's more to it. I think part of the discussion today is probably going to be based on that, I hope. But yeah, so we aggregate the demand from low-income consumers. In our case, it's a very interesting go-to-market, which is the factory workers. As you know, Bangladesh is home to roughly 4.3 million RMG workers alone. Collectively, they do groceries of about $2 billion a year. And due to the high inflationary nature of the times we're living in, they're essentially priced out. So what we've done is we basically aggregate their demand. Through our platform, we connected to the producers. And through that, they essentially get low-cost groceries, essentially consisting of essential commodities like rice, lentil, edible oil, some fresh produce like onions and potatoes, of course. So that's what we do. That's how we started. Of course, we have ever since been expanded into other areas. So we work with a lot of agri-processors in securing their raw materials. For example, paddy. We started doing that for our own private labeling, for our own products like rice. So that's becoming into an interesting channel for us as well. And we're now tapping into, as you said, import dependency, which is the next chapter of the question. How do we reduce the import dependencies? So I'll get to that question now, now that I'm done with the intro. So I think, sadly, this is my view, I don't think Bangladesh will ever be a net can come out of that net importer mode. I think realistically, we have to accept the fact that we are the third largest importer, food importer in the world. How do we not become the third, right? How do we reduce the dependency? Because quite frankly, we are a very dense country. We've got nearly 180 million people. And the number of the arable land isn't increasing. It's going to shrink. That's the reality, right? So as that happens, you know, eventually, how do you strategically focus on productive areas where, you know, just not focus on rice? You got to spread it out, of course. And then how do you strategically start building what you can grow locally versus what you need to import? So that's the place we want to build. And to do that, there needs to be some underlying infrastructural constraints or hindrance that we need to overcome, right? For example, we talk a lot about cold chain, but what good is a cold chain when, you know, most of your crop production is grains, rice, for example, right? Why is it that we still need to import rice despite claiming you know, we are self-sufficient in rice, right? So there are grain storages that also need to be taken into consideration. So the underlying infrastructure plays a crucial role. How do we get there? Lots of ways. I'll just keep it short. I think there's other questions. Firstly, of course, your storage. So let's start with rice. We still need to import rice. We need to stop doing that. We produce enough. So grain silos, you know, I know that a fact that the previous governments had taken initiative that never happened, transpired into something meaningful. Of course, start building those grain silos. If you look at the markets in US, you know, they're big producers of grains. You know, you've got the soybean and you've got, you know, the other grains as well. But they built massive infrastructure. They've got the grain elevators. You've got the railway tracks going past it, all the way to the ports. You know, it's very meticulously planned infrastructure, right? And I'm not saying we're going to get there, but I'm just saying, giving you kind of what can be done, okay? Of course, on the local production side, you know, we need to start looking at beyond, for example, rice. And a lot of that is actually looking into, you know, regenerative agricultural practices that improves your soil quality, organic matter, that when you do cover cropping, you may start growing other crops which are actually very important, like your potatoes, right? We import a lot of that. That's your cold chain. So building your cold chain infrastructure, it's a no-brainer. But other cover crops, for example, could be useful. In this case, lentils as well. So strategically shifting your cropping cycle as well. So running out of time, so I think I gave you some indication of how you can do that.
Nicely pointed out that we will remain a net importer, but what we can do is decrease the balance, decrease the gap, and that could be done either by decreasing import or increasing export, the net balance. Shifting to Ataur Bhai, don't quote me on this, but I read somewhere that from farm to my plate, each grain of rice changes on average 27 hands in Bangladesh. It could be more, it could be less, but that's the roundabout number. So the supply chain, we all know it's quite inefficient, the agri and commodity supply chain, and ShopUp is working on the supply chain sector, commodity and other goods as well. So taking up from Bouland Bhai's point that what are the opportunities in export? I know that ShopUp and also iFarmer has started export last year or the year before that. So what are the opportunities do you see? And there are also very young guys here who are students. What could they do? How could they start something where they could also contribute to the to exporting agri goods and decrease that balance of net import?
Sure. So a brief intro. I am one of the founder of ShopUp. we mainly work on figuring out better distribution model in Bangladesh. We distribute product for FMCG companies like Unilever, Marico, Reckitt. Also, we distribute product like fish, rice, paddy. We also have a logistics business where we give trucking service and basically deliver your products to basically your house. So on your question, for export, if I basically take, like we haven't been doing export for a long time, but so far what I have understood, there are, I would say, 3 key problems. One of the problem is basically demand generation. Like everybody thinks basically in Bangladesh, if we have a lot of supplier, everybody would be able to export product, and there are enough demand available in the market. While that's true, but you actually need to aggregate those demands. So everybody would say like Pran has a very good export machine, like and they do. If you go, like they have large teams in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Dubai, Malaysia, Singapore. Like they have built that network. One of the strengths basically that they have been able to build is basically this network, right? So today ShopUp is working on that, like how to build that for like everybody. But I would say like that's one of the key challenge. You need to really have structured demand to be able to export. Nobody is going to hand out basically export. So secondly, I would say the inefficiency in terms of production. So even though today, so we closely work with fish, we wanted to basically export the fish that we distribute, but unfortunately the prices of our fish is so high that we can't really compete with India or Myanmar. So even though the labor cost is basically lower, but our overall infra or supply chain cost is so high, it's very, very difficult to export that product. So we are having basically, there are certain products of course is exportable, but the main production like the pangash or let's say even rui is very, very difficult to export, competing with basically our neighbors. And I feel like there are enough opportunities in terms of production. How can we make it better? And third is basically, of course, supply chain inefficiencies and production quality. I would say, let's say we probably have the best mangoes in the world. Taste-wise,
I agree.
Yeah, but we can't really export those because it doesn't look good. Simply, it looks bad. Like you cannot export that to USA. So far, I believe these are all solvable problems. For example, Thailand, India has figured out, like they have worked on those to improve basically the mango sizes, basically the quality of mangoes, how you pack, everything basically matters. I feel like all of these 3 are sort of bottleneck, but I think all 3 are solvable problem. I think through technology or if people actually give some focus, I think should be able to figure out. Yeah.
Thank you. Excellent answer. So moving on to Nazat Bhai. Nazat Bhai is a logistics investor. They have invested in multiple logistics startups in Bangladesh. They have also invested in other economies as well. I would like to know from him his learnings and the opportunities having the exposure to multiple economies from the fund and also other sectors. Transportation is sort of in a unique place in Bangladesh in a sense that large vehicles cannot be used in the entire supply chain. There are issues in vehicles, there are issues in infrastructure, all sorts of people cannot get into the farm and collect the crops. So in terms of transportation, from farm to arot to your plate, What are the challenges and opportunities do you see as a logistics specialist? But before that, I would like you to introduce yourself briefly.
Thank you. I'm Nazat Chowdhury, partner and managing director for South Asia Tech. It's a fund based out of US, which invests in growth stage logistics, transportation startups in South Asia. So we have invested in 7 startups in Bangladesh and in India and a few others around South Asia. We also have investments in farm distribution, fresh produce distribution, Foshol.com. And we also work with PrioShop and others who also do some of the commodities trading and things like that. So before I get into your answer, I think what I would like to say is when we're talking about logistics, logistics is not just transportation.
Absolutely.
So what does logistics do? Logistics bridges between demand and supply over space and time. So we need to make sure when something is available at the place and time when it is needed, and that's what's the job of doing efficient logistics. And when Qazi Bhai and Ataur Bhai have mentioned, is a lot of the problems that we are talking about is that we are inefficient in managing our supply chain. So it's not only that we need to transport these goods, we need to plan them properly, predict them properly, the demands, and then how can we synchronize harvesting, how can we synchronize planting. So logistics doesn't start just when you need a truck. So I think that's what in agriculture becomes much more important, because when you are working with any fresh produce, it's very time sensitive. And then we are talking about mechanization in our agriculture, we're talking about digitization in our agriculture, but I think we also need a lot of process re-engineering and consolidation. Because without this, we cannot get to the quality, we cannot get to the systems and processes that we talk about. Our agricultural systems from production up to retail is so fragmented, then when we are benchmarking it against like other countries or Western practices, we fall behind a lot. So to do that, we need to look at logistics as a holistic solution. And when we invest in some of the investments that we made in Bangladesh and around the region, we look at how this can make it more efficient. And for that, it starts, like we talk about tech, but the purpose of tech is to do those predictions better, to communicate between these locations where the demand is there and where the supply is. Doing those things better is the real purpose of becoming efficient. And to do that, as you mentioned, like different sizes of transportation and things like that get involved, the problem is if we can predict better, if we can plan better, if we can involve different partners, different stakeholders into the ecosystem much better, that will be more efficient. But how do we make it more efficient? One of these is it has to be consolidated and corporatized. But how do we corporatize is there are different strategies. We can ask global giants to come in and just take it over. But what we would prefer is to bring homegrown startups that learn on the ground, create our own indigenous solutions, and implement it incrementally to improve it. So it may take a little bit more time, but I think that's the thing that we as investors are looking for, and we're trying to find out those innovative ideas or efficient execution. A lot of times the ideas may not be as innovative as we may think of them, but executing them in a more efficient manner and being persistent in it is what we look for. Thank you.
Excellent point. Moving to Jonathan, so Bangladesh is the 8th most vulnerable country to climate change in the world. According to World Bank reports, 25% of the arable land Bangladesh will lose due to climate change. Yet, Bangladeshi startups and Bangladeshi businesses hasn't been really able to attract climate focused fund capital as of now? I know IIX have lent to iFarmer and WeGrow both, but we would like to see more of that. So before you get into how Bangladeshi businesses can attract more of that capital where it's needed very much, I would also like you to introduce yourself a bit and IIX also.
So maybe a short introduction. IIX is an impact fund based out of Singapore. So in Bangladesh, we've invested in the agriculture space and the clean energy space, but of course, regionally, we've invested in financial inclusion, circular economy. So maybe a little bit of structure towards why we invested in iPharma and WeGrow, and also we've invested in few clean tech startups. So I think one of the fundamental issues when we came to the market, what we saw was we lent debt, right? So in terms of working capital. So one of the biggest issues most of these companies had was on terms of record keeping. How do they actually keep records of their financials? So when you look at institutional finance investors, one of the biggest aspects for them is KYC. So when you look at some of these like companies startups who borrow, they borrow from the informal sector. So when it comes to investors coming in from the financial sector, one of the biggest aspects for them is KYC, know your customers. So if you have borrowed from different parties, that would be a huge issue for a formal sector investor coming in. So, but of course, for IIX, we took the brunt of the hit and we said, okay, it's fine. But then again, if you're looking at a bigger investor coming in, you should formalize your sector. So most of the investments which we put to iFarm and WeGrow, we were the first institutionalized lenders coming in. And then, of course, there's more pipeline coming in as well. So other aspect is a lot of the, since we're talking about the agri sector, one of the biggest aspects we see a lot of startups is how they record their books. So when it comes to financial record keeping, so of course, while the innovation is great, I always say the biggest aspect is in terms of how you display your investor ability. So or your question to your investors. So a lot of startups show your gross transaction value. So when it comes to a lot of startups, like they don't actually show your income, but your gross transaction value will be in millions. But when you actually look at your income, it's even 500K. So when it comes to an investor, it's not the gross transaction value which is important. It's actually the income. And when you look at the gross profit or the net profit margin, it's really narrow. And when you actually look at the cash flows, the business actually doesn't have a cash flow to follow on. So when it comes to investors now, in the world, we are looking at the world with Trump policies and everything. Investors are no longer looking at businesses who are looking at great profitability and your working capital cycle being like 6 months to 8 months. Now investors are looking at solid businesses who's able to generate cash flow positivity. So that's something which businesses or agri-tech startups should look at. You're continuously churning out a positive cash flow and keeping the business afloat. So what we see a lot of in startups in Bangladesh or even regionally, they are showing great results, showing great innovation, but in terms of the business, how they position to investors, it's not great. The record keeping is way away. Like how you show your balance sheet or your income statement is way different than how you record your management accounts. So those are some things I think as an investor we position, right? Of course, it will be great. Like the first meeting will be really nice of you. But really, when you look at an investor, we would really go down to your financials. It has not come to a point just because you're an impact investor, we would put more money towards impact. Of course, impact is important, but end of the day, what is impact without financial gains, right? You have to keep finances afloat to keep the impact going. So I think the biggest aspect, I think, for agri-tech startups is how you record your financial book is very important. So see how your business modality works. While the innovation is great, if you're not, record keeping is not up to date, I think that's a huge red flag for investor point of view. And also, innovative angle is for agri-tech startups is use data points. Like one of the biggest aspects for banks or non-banking financial institution is they can't lend without collateral. But you can be you can give API to the banks, and banks can use those data points and use that to lend to the farmers or the even fishery sector. So I think those are some of the things which we are looking at, and now investors are looking at more ecosystem models as well, rather than just one size fits all.
All right, so anyone in the audience, if they want to raise from IIX, record keeping is a must, clean record keeping. So coming back to Qazi Bhai, so the event name is Startup Summit, so we got to talk about tech a little bit at least. So we talked about productivity previously, how that could affect our net import balance. So what kind of tech are already implemented in our farming? AI is a big buzzword right these days. Before that, it was blockchain. Before that, it was mechanization. But where are we at tech in agriculture sector? How are farmers adopting it, and what are the bottlenecks?
That's a great question. We're still at the mechanization phase, just to keep it short. And I think we will be there for a while. IoT, AI, fine. There are other basic stuff we need to solve, but doesn't mean that the application doesn't exist now. But it's how you envisage the solution to be deployed. Say, for example, I do not believe that Bangladesh as a market is ready for farmers to be mobile native, through which they're going to be seeing their crop being damaged due to pest issues or having some soil degradation problems. It's just not there yet, okay? But doesn't mean that the application doesn't exist. It exists as an enterprise level, say, for example. So, okay, you talked about mechanization. Of course, that's been going on for a number of years. We need more of that for lots of elements, whether it's soil tillage, irrigation. Those are the basic must-haves that you need to do to optimize your productivity. So that needs to be there. That needs to be spread across even more. Farmers need to get access to those machineries, and that requires finance to some extent, and that's a separate topic of discussion. IoT, it's not a market yet. Again, at an enterprise level where you're doing contract farming, for example, if Prawn was to do it for their own contract farming through their own, very close-looped farming network, it's a possibility. But that small farmer in Brahmanbaria or anywhere else in the country, it's not going to happen. It's just that economics don't work. But AI, of course, at a public sector level, at an enterprise level, huge potentials. For example, I talked about regenerative agriculture, and that's something that a lot of the development sector has been doing for many years now. But what's been missing is what we call the monitoring and the verification side of it, right? And that requires tech, right? So for example, I know that a lot of those development projects focused on helping farmers to adopt those practices. Now, what those practices do is essentially increases soil quality, improves the carbon, the amount of carbon in the soil, and what it happens is the concept is carbon sequestration, right? So, how do you start tracking that? Once you can start tracking that through using, satellite imagery, then that's when the application of AI comes in. You can start predicting your soil quality, the weather, all these elements, the dynamics that come into play for your production output is all dependent on those variables, right? So there is a lot of tech that's been built, and the application for those I see reside with, for example, the Bangladesh government, the Agricultural Extension Office could be using it to understand what is the production of rice going to be. Do I need to import? This year, how much do I need to import, right? And then on top of that, at a grand scale, you can start tapping into the carbon credit markets as well. Start monetizing on that. You can do that through your cropping. You can do that through forestry. There's so many innovative ways you can do that, right? So those are more practical application. Again, more enterprise level application and more maybe government level, institutional level adoption, not particularly at an individual farmer level adoption.
All right. So in terms of tech adoption, what we understand is we are still at the mechanization stage, and practically it's in the enterprise level still now. So going to Ataur Bhai, well, every startup right now wants to raise as much as ShopUp did, wants to be as big as ShopUp have become. Given working in such a market where tech adoption is so difficult, what are the technologies that ShopUp or other startups have been able to make its customers adopt so far? And how do you scale in a market where tech adoption is challenging, I would say?
Sure. Yeah, it's challenging, but I would say I'll double down basically what he said. So today ShopUp uses AI, but for example, our AI is used in basically better routing. Like how can we deliver efficiently, right? In our, let's say, Redex business, what would happen, people would give plain text address, like we somehow have to structure that address and route it through entire Bangladesh, right? So that's basically where we apply AI. So most of the application is basically internal yet. So how I basically see technology will come in future. So today I would say the core technology that needs to be built is in supply chain. So your end supplier to your logistics, your warehouse, then your truck, to probably your delivery guy. So it's very unrealistic today that a retailer would, or basically someone who is, let's say in Krishi market, would use our mobile app and place an order. They would place order when they would actually need it. It's not like they can't use mobile app, they can, but they won't. But on the, because there are enough sales representative or manual labor in the field who can do those on behalf of them. But the core technology, what ShopUp is building, or I think where we can really see adoption would happen is basically internal infra technologies. And that will eventually, I believe, enable basically the consumer level adoption of those technologies as well. I think it will take some time, but that will for sure happen because it will reduce your cost significantly on the demand generation side. So once that the inflection point we hit, you'll see a drastic adoption of technology. I'm pretty sure today everybody uses Bikash app. I'm not sure that happened. That did not happen in like one day. Initially, I think first probably 6-7 years, Bikash did not even have an app, right? So that happened because of the ask from the consumer itself. I think that will happen eventually, but till then, everybody needs to be building the infra technologies that they can. We, from my experience, we have tried to force app to the retailer, but that would not happen unless you have figured out the entire supply chain and they have enough benefit to use an app.
There was another part, like how do you scale without tech?
Like scale is mostly how you your operation is efficient. If your operation is efficient and if you can absorb the margin where the consumer where they are not using the app, if your business can generate enough margin to do that, you can scale, right? So, but the main efficiency comes from basically building your infra, and that's where you'd be putting your technology. I can give one example, like a simple approval management system or reconciliation system had reduced about, let's say, 200 people's manual labor for us. Like just by basically, we automated some of the approvals and some of the cash reconciliation that we were doing. Bangladesh still is a cash-heavy market, especially in agro business, right? So there is a lot of opportunity where I think from big companies to basically small startup can probably do, like even new startup can be built on top of those, like small technologies for, let's say, big corporations. Right, where, but the main focus on be improving the efficiencies in supply chain.
Great words. So we can scale without delivering our products and services through tech, but we can always use tech for our operational efficiency and margin expansions, and that will result in scale ultimately. Moving on to both the investors and the financiers, I would like to first go to Nazat Bhai. Overall, as an investor, let's say somebody there, I'm sure a lot of founders in the audience outside here, they would like to pitch to you. So in terms of agri or agri periphery area, like say agri logistics or agri storage, and agri itself, what investment opportunities do you see right now in Bangladesh? If you'd like to take.
So as we were talking, I think it came out that we need a lot of infrastructure. But when we are talking about infrastructure, the different levels of infrastructure. So primary infrastructure normally is being built by the government, the development partners like roads, power, our communication infrastructure and things like that. But on top of that, secondary infrastructure like warehouses, trucks, these like mechanization in agriculture. So those are also investments. Those are being made by, let's say, private investors, banks, they are funding it. So where investors like us come in is in the third level of infrastructure, as Ataur Bhai was saying, Qazi Bhai was saying. So you have to build intelligent infrastructure. You need to have information infrastructure. You need to improve the process infrastructure. So those kind of things, I think, is what we are trying to fund. We are trying to build, but these also require the other infrastructure to be present. So the primary and secondary infrastructure, I think in the primary infrastructure, we have developed a lot. But in the secondary spaces, we cannot just ask a startup for sure, or someone to build all the cold chain, to build all the warehouses, to build all the, let's say they can set up collection centers, but then they might want to rent it instead of building it. So, because that's the kind of funding level that they have available. So those are the things that needs to be present to make the investment that we are making successful. What we sometimes are seeing is the investments in the, like as I said, like information level infrastructure, startups and other funding that we are doing, with the expectation the primary and secondary level infrastructure will grow within, let's say we see, okay, we are in the next 3 years, of course, these will happen. These will get built. So these startups will start to get successful. What we do see that we may have been over optimistic in a lot of things, and I think all of us, we are optimistic people, that's why we are investing or founding startups, but I think that's sometimes is happening much slower than what we expected. So in all levels that we are seeing. So I think that's what would be the expectation going forward. We'll see that the investments that we are making in building this intelligent infrastructure will be enabled by the other infrastructure that are required all over the country so that we can actually scale things. So a lot of our startups are proving their innovations, as he mentioned, and we are helping them improve their governance and things. But to scale, it's not only the funding required or the amount of funding required increases if the other infrastructure is not built by funding that are possible, easier. So private people can build warehouses, cold chains, buy trucks, banks can finance them easily. So those are the things that may not be happening, or we may not be able to connect them into a proper ecosystem well, because maybe we are not able to create proper incentives, create proper market signals to make these things happen faster.
Great. So anyone in the audience, if they want South Asia Tech Partners money, they need to work on infrastructure, they need to work on problems that hasn't been solved yet, and Nazat Bhai is here to write the check to you. So going to Jonathan, very straightforward question, since you have exposure to Southeast Asia and South Asia as well. What can Bangladesh learn from other economies?
Sure. So maybe I think I'll put it very straight. So for us, at least, technology is only the icing on the cake, right? So if you don't have the fundamentals, it's not going to work. So if you look at Bangladesh still, as Qazi mentioned, like the infrastructure, there's lots of things to happen in the local economy, right? So but we believe even at farm level, there's so many things which can happen. So example, we've invested in a business in Vietnam who used to be planting coffee, and they have now done, they are replanting basically with coffee macadamia. And so when it comes to technology, it's always not technology when you're developing a software or anything. It can be even, you experimenting on a different variety of coffee trees. So this startup who we invested basically developed different varieties of coffee trees where the coffee beans actually grow in the end tip of the tree. So that way it's very easy for the farmers to pluck it. And also it needs less sunlight. So basically it can intercrop with the macadamia trees. So when it comes to coffee beans, it normally may be a kilo, maybe about $200 or so. But macadamia, of course, fetches about $3,000 per kilo. So now what happens to this startup, because of the innovation they have done, they've diversified their revenue. They've also, they also can, as Qazi mentioned, they also can claim carbon credits because they are reusing the soil, which is basically retaining nitrogen. So they have basically, through the innovation, it's not technology. So it's actually developing a different varieties of trees, using the current natural environment itself to create innovation. So through a normal coffee plantation, we can now be using technology and innovation, has diversified their revenue into 3 angles. So even Bangladesh can do that, So it's not always like where you have to build a software or, weather patterns or anything. You can already use the infrastructure you have in the country itself, to develop the sector. This way, you can also develop different varieties of revenue, different avenues of funding. So I think as an investor, I think Bangladesh still, technology as I mentioned, is only the icing on the cake. But fundamentally, there's so many developments which can happen. Like even when it comes to ecosystem models as well, like it has to touch all the players as well. So if you have followed the global news, what's happening with e-fishery, one of the billion-dollar impact startups is coming to failure because like certain angles didn't work. They only focused on one area. But now if you look at startups who are going well is basically startups who are looking at the entire ecosystem. Because farmers are still like technologies, as I mentioned, it's only one stack. They want like the finances aspect. How is their insurance covered? How is their supply chain covered? How is their impact? So when you're looking at a startup, don't only look at one angle. See how you are looking at the ecosystem model. Investors now are not looking at one angle. So see how you can cover the entire ecosystem when you're looking at a solution, not only one aspect.
Great. So ladies and gentlemen, we're running out of time, so we'll cut a few questions. And for the Q&A, I will request the speakers to be around a while after this session so that it won't be a formal Q&A here on the mic, but you can go and ask to the speakers after this session. Before we end, I just want one sentence ending note from each of you. Where do you see Bangladesh agriculture sector 5 years down the line in terms of, let's say, supply chain efficiency or productivity, or even you can take your investment angles, your vision for the next 5 years of Bangladesh agriculture, very short.
I like to see a much more greater collaboration between the public and the private sector. To achieve some of the milestones, the critical milestone that needs to be achieved in developing, like as Nazat Bhai was saying, the underlying infrastructure, the needed underlying infrastructure. Now that requires capital inflow. That is not just venture-backed. It needs to be, a combination of, some venture-backed, but these are bigger capital play involvement required, right? So a greater public-private collaboration underlying the capital inflow for requiring these kind of infrastructural development. In terms of, in terms of agricultural practices, and I think we need to be much more smarter, like Jonathan was saying, stop focusing on rice as a crop, start figuring out how strategically Bangladesh, on the climatic conditions that we have, what else can we do that are high value, that helps us reduce some of the import dependencies, but also allows farmers to remain farmers because they can actually build a sustainable model from it, right? So that is also one of the things that we need to focus on. I'll end there.
It's the same question for all. Ataur bhai, where do you would like to see Bangladeshi agriculture sector in 5 years in terms, you can take your angle since it's supply chain, where do you see it?
Yeah, what I see, like both in terms of payment, credit or loan management, and transport technologies, I think there are significant development or companies are working on it. I think if I compare between last 5 years and now, I see there has been great movements in terms of how we probably can make some of those efficient. And I do see like significant improvement there. Like today, us, iFarmer, Agroshift, there are other companies working on it. I think some of these problems will be cracked, and I do see like significant change. Like at least probably with the help of some of these startups. Yeah.
Nazat bhai, same question to you.
So in 5 years, I'd like to see some of we are an agricultural country, so you'd like to see agri-startups from Bangladesh become regional giants or global giants with innovations that we can speak of. We'd like to see exits that really encourage more investment. So these are the two things that I'd see in the next 5 years.
Jonathan.
So I would say when it comes to startups, don't always look at innovation or like technology, but look at within as well what can be done within the current ecosystem. Like speak to farmers, speak to local stakeholders, see what are the real problems. So technology doesn't always solve everything. So it's, as I mentioned, it's only the outer layer of it. Yeah.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you got something out of this conversation. We had, again, Qazi Bhai from Agroshift, Ataur Bhai from ShopUp, Nazat Bhai from South Asia Tech Partners, and Jonathan from IIX Impact, and I am Wahid, I'm from IDLC Venture Capital. These panelists will be around here, so if you have questions, you can reach out to them and ask your questions. Thank you everyone for attending. Thank you very much.